This is today's little project. Twisted, soldered, planished, in between where it's twisted. Nice and simple, but something just a little bit different. Ciao. For this I'm using 2mm wire and a piece 600 mil long that I'll bend in the middle, and I'm going to put a light twist in it. I don't want a tight twist, and the idea is once I make this into a bangle using the twisted wire, I want to gently hammer it a couple of different ways so that the twist opens up. So we'll see how we go. So make sure your wire is annealed and we'll twist it. So 600 mil long, 2 feet in the old money. I'm just going to grab both pieces with my cross-lock, self-locking pliers. Fairly snug, we don't want it to slip out. Now you can twist this either right or left, it doesn't matter. I'm going right. And I think that's about all the twist I want. And we need to cut this fairly close to the proper length because we're not going to actually forge it. We're just going to lightly hammer it to get a little bit of detail in it. So I think I would guess about 10 mil shorter than the diameter plus the thickness times pi, minus 10 mil. Form it, solder the ends together so that they match perfectly, and then I'll show you what to do. So my bangle size is 66 millimeters, and because this is 2 mil wire and it's twisted, it'll be 4. So it would be 70 times 3.14, and then subtract 10, so it's going to be around 200 for me. Now I'm just going to cut this where the wires cross, and then hopefully at 200 they'll cross again. So it's slightly off. So adjust it. I would say slightly shorter, because when we hammer it, it's going to increase in length. So we measure it with that flat and with that flat at 200. It's going to be just about right. Sometimes you get lucky. Now you may have to anneal this again because we've work hardened it when we twisted it. And I would say yes, anneal it. I'm just going to bend this by hand. As with the small wire and the fact that it's been annealed, it's quite easy to form. And you can see that once I mess with it a while, the twist will line up quite nicely. So take your time, get it as nice as you can, because we want a good solder joint here. And at this point, you can see one is slightly longer than the other one. I'll file those back so that they're the right length. Otherwise, this is going to look ugly. So you can just hold it vertical against your bench pin. And that one is about 2 mil long, so I'm going to cut that before I file it. Oftentimes it's easier to use your saw. Save yourself a little time. That's better. And just a hair more, and then we'll be ready to solder, hard solder. So you can see I soldered this one, and this one's slightly long, which is good, because now I can cut it. I'll just saw it where it needs to be, being careful I don't notch this side, and then I'll solder that one. Now in a perfect world you would have been able to solder these so that they were separate. My world's pretty imperfect. I've managed to solder them together, which is fine. Pickle it, tidy this up, get it as pretty as you can, and then we'll go on the bracelet mandrel and play with it with a hammer. When you get your joint tidied up, we're going to go on our bracelet mandrel and just push that down as far as you can. Use your rawhide hammer to round it up. And then we're going to get our planishing hammer out. And make it's round. Now we're going to make it flat. So you can just hammer that on your bench plate. At each of the high spots. Now I'm going to use the flat side of my planishing hammer. You could probably use the slightly rounded side if you wanted. Yeah, maybe I'll use the slightly rounded side. I'm just going to hammer in each twist. So at each spot where it's twisted, I'm going to gently hammer just to emphasize the fact that it's a twisted wire. Turn it around, go back over it. So now, what I've done is I've given it this profile, and by hammering on the flat part, I've given it a little bit of detail, and by not hammering where it crosses over, we haven't thinned it, so we haven't made it weak. So that's the idea. Twisted wire with just a little bit of planishing. So it came out exactly the way I wanted, but slightly small. So I would suggest that you just deduct 6 mil rather than 10, and you'll be on the money. So hallmark it now, polish it up, and you're finished.